We just got done reacting to the NBA draft lottery, and we saw that the Atlanta Hawks got the number 1 pick. So we are going to continue our series where we give a little preview of each of the teams in the lottery and what they might need in the offseason and the draft coming up. I'm your co-host, Branden, and I'm here with Jake, Cameron, and Brody. How are you guys feeling about this Hawks having the first pick?
Yeah, I feel like it's almost poetic, right? This class has so many questions at the top. Wouldn't surprise anyone if we see like an Anthony Bennett type pick where the top team just picked whoever they liked the best, even if it wasn't consensus. And now with the Hawks moving up 9 spots in their projected lottery odds, a team that already had so many question marks about, do you keep Trae Young and Dejounte Murray together? Do you make some sort of blockbuster move to blow that up? Now that they have the top pick, those question marks just get even bigger, and I think all of us here at League Bound are here for it. Just all the chaos, we're going to be breaking it all down.
Yeah, I'm still kind of in shell shock. This Hawks team, they won the first pick, but now they have a couple months of just mayhem ahead of them. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with the pick. They have some really tough decisions to make.
It's also weird because, like, this is a draft where there's so many players who you're kind of relying on the potential long term. And I feel like with the Hawks, their big thing is that they've been mediocre. That's like the whole storyline. And I don't think there's anyone who's you could put them in and that's going to push them over the edge right now. Maybe I'm wrong. There could be somebody, but it just doesn't really feel that way. So I feel like +2, you've got Trey Young and Dejounte Murray, who questions have been kind of surrounding them about their availability. I think you could try and maybe push something together, but I don't know if it'll be that much different from what you've already had. So I don't know. I'm kind of still in the process too, where I'm kind of trying to process this and like understand what would be the move to make or what the GMs would even be thinking. But it's just hard to really conclude anything.
Yeah, so they got the first pick in the draft, and now they have a decision on whether or not to trade Trey Young or not. I think that has to be top billing first item on the agenda, is whether or not they want to keep Trey Young, who is signed for a 5-year, $215 million. I think his extension kicks in here soon. He'll be making $48 million a year by the time he turns 28. So it's hard because he's still a young player. Like, he's not this old guy in the league. But in 2026, 2027, he'll be 28 years old. He's a small guard. Do you want to be paying someone like that $50 million a year? And if so, what do you do with the first pick? Like, I don't know.
I feel like, too, the thing is, whatever draft you make, and if you try to, or whatever pick you make and you try to commit to it, you mentioned that Trey Young, he's still kind of younger, but like it doesn't really fit with the timeline of the guy who you're going to draft. Mm-hmm. So I think it's kind of, I feel like whatever pick you're making, if you do decide to keep him around, you probably have maybe like one season to really get something going, and then you have to make another decision.
Yeah, in correction, his original deal was 5 years long. There's 3 years left on the deal currently.
Yeah.
So you have him, and then you have Dejounte Murray, who is under contract until he's 31 years old. His contract ends the 2027-2028 season, and he's making $30 million a year in that season. So it's not a bad contract. It's pretty tradable.
Especially with, like, by then you would think
the cap will keep going.
The cap's going to go up, and one of your best guards making like 25, 30 million, even nowadays with like Jalen Brunson being on a similar paycheck to that, they're all saying that at that high level of like production, that's a great contract. And if Dejounte is making not as much money as that, that's probably a tradable contract.
Yeah, so you have those two players to make decisions on, and contracts that they're locked in for a little bit, but not forever. Like, it's we're approaching the time where superstars start looking around and like, I might want to get out of here. So as far as draft assets, they have no pick next year. They don't have their first round pick, or at least they don't have their own first round pick. We know they're supposed to have Sacramento's this year, but it ended up being in the lottery, so they don't have it. So we'll see what that means for their pick next year. But as far as their own pick, they don't have it next year. So really, this would be the only pick they have until the 2026 and 2028 seasons, where San Antonio still even then has the right to swap in those seasons. So, or at least in 2026 they have the right to swap. So this is a really monumental pick and kind of inflection point for the franchise. So first, if you keep the pick, what do you think is the move here for Atlanta?
If you keep it, I feel like you'd probably want to go for a wing or maybe another big. Honestly, I feel like Klingen or Sarr could be a good option here, just because Trey Young, he's a good passer. So you'd have another lob threat, but also you'd have more of an anchor down there. And you have some good defensive wings with Jalen Johnson there too. So I feel like just ironing out the defense would be the main thing. But at the same time, I feel like you probably would try to get some more offensive production. And if they did want like more of an offensive-minded guy, I feel like Buzelis. I know that seems kind of high, but I feel like among the wings, that's probably the best. There's also Connect, but I think Buzelis would probably go higher. But at 1, that does seem kind of crazy. But like you mentioned,
it's this class, man. It's crazy.
Anything is possible. So,
and I mean, I feel like Jalen Johnson had a pretty quiet year among like just overall NBA fans, but he was fourth on the team in scoring at 16 points per game. So that's definitely not, a bad season by any means for Jalen Johnson, who's just 22 years old right now. But at that top pick, I don't think Jalen Johnson is really holding you back on taking the top wing in this class, if that is the position you think you need to address, because I feel like if you're going to keep Trey Young and Dejounte, you wouldn't take a guard, because at best it's a bench player, and you're not taking a bench player at the number 1 pick, right? So you're looking at the front court, and you've got Clint Capela, who's going to be 30 pretty soon, and then you've got Onyeka Okongwu, who's only 23. So I feel like maybe addressing the 5 would be another option if they want to take another shot at kind of that defensive-minded, rim-protecting, screen-setting big. You could go for a Klingen number 1 to replace Clint Capela, because he's making over $20 million, and that's some money you could maybe get off the books in some sort of trade. But if you wanted to add a little bit more versatility offensively, you probably lean more toward like an Alexander Sarr to play a little bit faster, kind of off Onyeka Okongwu at the 4. Okongwu's got some good defensive versatility, and I feel like Sarr could provide a little bit more offensive versatility. So that could be a little bit of a duo up front as well for them.
Yeah, so I'm kind of conflicted, because in a way, I think their probably biggest need is the 5, especially because Capela, I think, has 1 year left on his deal. So that's definitely, especially athletic bigs, once they start getting towards a certain age, their production starts to kind of dip. So that would be the thing I would probably think was the biggest need. And the best players in the draft happen to be centers at this moment. So Sarr would be someone I would really look at. But really, what does that do for Atlanta? Like, how much better is Sarr going to be for Capela right now? And this is a team that expected to make the playoffs this year. Like, this isn't like your normal number 1 team that was just horrible all year. Like, this was a team that didn't make it, but they expected to. Like, they had expectations coming into the season, and I just don't know how much Sarr gives you in replacement of Capela. So I don't think I go 5. You obviously, if this first scenario is if they keep everyone. Mm-hmm. So you can't go guard. I think you have to kind of go wing. And if you go wing, I do like Buzelis. I think at the number 1 pick, if I'm taking one of the wings first, I would say with the first pick, you just have to kind of start. Like, you have to swing for the fences. And I think Buzelis he has the highest upside amongst all the wings in the class. He's the one that I think if everything clicks right, he could be a potential star. So That's probably what I would go if they keep the pick. Now, let's say they trade one of Trey Young or Dejounte Murray, or maybe even both. Let's say the nuclear option, they blow it up. What do you got? Do you keep the pick? Do you trade it? What do you do then?
It depends on what you're getting back. If you're getting a lot of future draft capital back, then I think you could maybe take that pick just because you have a lot more opportunities to try to hit on the draft. Like you mentioned before, if they don't trade anything to get more draft capital, they're a little bit hamstrung from the Dejounte Murray deal to begin with. So it's almost difficult, like mentally, to deal with if you're a Hawks fan, to trade for Dejounte Murray, give up all those picks, and then just to move off of him to get other picks back. It's just, it's really unfortunate the way that it would have turned out if that is what they end up doing. So I feel like Hawks fans, also you have to think about like that Luka versus Trey Young thing from the 2018 class when they could have had Luka. To trade Trey Young at this point for like future draft compensation would pretty much cement that L for the Hawks history. So they are in such a turning point in this franchise, and I almost feel like you have to take this opportunity to add a young piece because, like you said, they don't have much to work with in the future, and if this is all you got, you gotta hit it. So it's a lot of pressure.
I think personally, I would really hope a team falls in love with a player and I can trade down a little bit. I just think one is a really tough spot because just everything that comes with being the number one pick, it's a lot of pressure on players and it's pressure on the organization. Like, you don't want to be one of those teams who whiffed on the number one pick. You don't want to be Cleveland who whiffed on Anthony Bennett. Like, especially because the Hawks, there's no LeBron coming to save you from that. Like, that pick set the Cavs back a couple of years, and if missing on it here could have the potential to do the same thing for the Hawks. So I just think, in all likelihood, one of them are gone this year. Like, if not both, I think for sure one of the guards are gone. So I will try to trade down and possibly, I think if it's Murray that's gone, I would try to trade down not too far and try to get someone like a Stephon Castle. I think he would be a good fit alongside Trey Young. He gives you a lot what Murray gives you, but he's a little bit bigger and he's younger. So his deal would be even less. And I think if you pair that from what you get from the Murray deal, it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's still kind of being on the hamster wheel, but you get picks back for the future and you didn't squander a number one pick. I think if it's Trey Young they trade, I think I would try to trade back and get Dillingham. Like someone who brings the same type of explosiveness, someone the city of Atlanta can get behind, like his style of play, like it fits there, I think.
It's tough though because trading Trey Young, who is an offensive-minded, undersized guard, to go take a Dillingham, who you're basically asking him to be at least as good, if not better, than what Trey Young has been, which is a multiple-time All-Star and one of the top assist guys in the entire league. That's a lot of pressure on Rob Dillingham, and I feel like if they end up moving off Dejounte Murray and taking another undersized guard, the whole purpose of getting Dejounte Murray was because the defense was so bad. So if they move off Murray and take like a Reed Shepherd, I know, Brandon, you're a little bit high on his defense in terms of getting steals and kind of just being like a pest defensively, but Reed Shepherd and Dejounte Murray are completely different levels defensively at the guard position. So like I said, kind of coming into this discussion, there's so many question marks and there's not a lot of just simple, like easy solutions for this team. It's the GM for Atlanta has got a lot of thinking, a lot of pressure this offseason.
It's just hard because I feel like whatever you do, it doesn't necessarily move the needle right away. And like, even if you draft one of these players, it's not like they're necessarily deficient. They have defensive players. They have defensive wings. They also have offensive players. Obviously, they have Trey Young, but they also have Bogdanovich, who's a really good shooter. Mm-hmm. And then we mentioned Capela, obviously. So it's not that they don't have a lack of. There's not anything that needs to be addressed necessarily, like in terms of team need, because they do have players that can, fill these areas. So it's hard because even if you draft like even if you get the player that you want, and even if you do hit on it, it doesn't feel like it's going to necessarily change the franchise, which I think is just kind of the more I'm trying to like sit here and let this marinate because this is right after the reaction, but I feel like it's just I'm just kind of it's just a good summary of how this whole draft process has felt.
Okay, now we've had some time to think. I think I have an opinion. I think the model is flawed. I think the idea of the Hawks as a team behind Trae Young and Dejounte Murray, and I'm not as, like, I know a lot of people in NBA circles are kind of not as high on Trae Young. I think Trae Young's a really great player. I just don't think you're going to win with him and, like, another kind of guard on the court. Like, I think he needs to almost be put in a system with, he was the best that year they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, where he did all the ball handling, he did all the pick and rolls. Like, I think somewhere for him would probably be like a San Antonio, where he could kind of run the show and the ball's in his hands all the time. And I just don't think that really lends itself to having a player like Dejounte Murray next to him. So if I'm the Hawks, I'm trading one of Dejounte Murray and Trae Young back to the Spurs to try to get some control back over my picks. Like, if I can just undo the trade, like if I can get some of my picks back, whether it be for Trae Young or Dejounte Murray, and probably get a player back, because I do think Trae Young is worth more than just like maybe 2 firsts. I think if you could get 2 of your first, or at least a first and 1 of your swaps back, and you can get Keldon Johnson. I know they probably don't want to move off Devin Vassell, so you can get a Keldon Johnson and maybe another player you like off their roster. I think that would be a start. Like, I think that's probably where I would start. I'll probably move the other guard for picks and another player if I can. And I think with this first pick, if I have my picks back, then I think it gives me room to, if I like a player at the first pick, I take whoever I like. If not, I trade down, and it just gives you, it frees up this year, it frees up your future. I think you have to kind of trade both the guards this season, because right now you're paying, I just feel like standing pat and taking a big, or even taking a wing, like, you have a lot of money tied up in your wing positions. Like, you're paying DeAndre Hunter $20 million a year. You're paying Sadiq Bey, I know is coming up and he's not making that much, but he's gonna, like, you're gonna have to pay him or let him go. So then you have Bogdanovich too. Like, I just don't think any of the wings that would fit with the team standing pat would be worth taking. Like, you can, like, even let's say we took Buzelis, we both agree he had like a lot of potential. Like, that's a good pick for them. But if Trae Young's not gonna give him the ball, like, Buzelis is someone, in order for him to reach where you would want, where he would be worth taking a first round pick, you're gonna have to put the ball in his hands at least a little bit. And I think if you have Trae Young on the team and Dejounte Murray, that's just realistically not gonna happen. So
I think, in at least for the benefit of the discussion, you have to remember that the Hawks moved up 9 spots to get this number 1 pick. So you mentioned it earlier. This is not a team that was bottom of the barrel and we expected this. They were a team that was fringe play-in. And you also have to remember that Trae Young only played in 54 games last year. So wasn't a super healthy season from him. Still had great numbers, had over 10 assists a game, 25 points. But maybe with a slightly healthier season from Trae Young, they probably are not even in this position to begin with. So, you know, maybe we're a little bit off the Trae Young train too quickly, potentially. And maybe they sit at number 1 and just take Zachary Risacher and just hope that with a healthier Trae Young, they're probably already basically a playoff team. And maybe Risacher hits on that potential, and all of a sudden, you know, they've got Trae, Dejounte, Risacher being a top tier player for them, and then you ride it out with that front court, and maybe that's all they needed to do. Never know.
Do you like Risacher more than you like Jalen Johnson? Like, I think they kind of like Jalen Johnson, what he's done this year, and drafting Risacher kind of putting someone on his line there, like, you kind of taking up a little bit of his space. Or if you play them both together, then what do you do with Hunter, and what do you do with Bogdanovich? Like, it's just hard. I feel like they're in a really tough spot, but it's better than what it would have been if they got that 9th pick. So they just have some tough decisions to make.